Soft morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Anna poured herself a cup of coffee. The rich aroma filled the small but cozy space, a place she had always called home. She never needed much, just the warmth of a well-loved house, the sound of birds chirping outside, and the quiet satisfaction of a simple life. Anna had never been one for luxury. While other women her age indulged in designer handbags and extravagant vacations, she found joy in the little things. Afternoons spent tending to her garden, baking fresh bread, and sharing laughter with neighbors. She had always believed that happiness wasn't measured in wealth, but in moments of kindness and love. Her husband, Daniel, was much the same. A quiet, composed man, he never flaunted money, never boasted about success. Their life together was peaceful, unburdened by the expectations of high society. If people ever wondered how they managed to live so comfortably, they simply assumed Daniel had a well-paying job. And that was enough for Anna. She never pried, never questioned. That morning, as she packed her small suitcase for an upcoming trip, she had no idea that her world was about to shift in ways she could never have imagined. Anna arrived at the airport, her modest suitcase rolling behind her as she made her way to the check-in counter. The terminal buzzed with hurried footsteps and muffled announcements, but she remained calm, unbothered by the rush. She was traveling alone this time. Daniel had some business to attend to, so she planned to visit her sister for a few days. Handing over her ticket, she smiled at the airline attendant. "I was wondering if there's any chance for an upgrade to first class," she asked politely. It wasn't something she usually did, but Daniel had told her to treat herself for once. The attendant, a young woman with a forced smile, barely glanced at her before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. First-class seats are reserved for our VIP guests." Anna nodded understandingly. She wasn't a VIP, just a simple woman asking a simple question. "That's all right," she replied, not wanting to cause a fuss. But before she could step away, another passenger arrived at the counter. A well-dressed woman in designer heels and sunglasses perched atop her head. Without even asking, the attendant greeted her with enthusiasm. "Welcome, Ms. Sterling. We've just upgraded you to first class. Please enjoy your flight." Anna watched as the woman accepted the upgrade with a smirk, walking off without so much as a thank you. A small pang of disappointment settled in her chest, but she shook it off. After all, she wasn't one to expect special treatment. Little did she know, someone else would soon have a very different reaction to how she had been treated. Anna tried to brush off the moment, reminding herself that it wasn't a big deal. She had never been one for luxury. She was happy with her simple life, and economy class would get her to her destination just fine. But as she walked toward security, she couldn't help but overhear the airline attendant chuckling with her colleague. "Did you see her?" Thinking she could get a first-class upgrade, the attendant scoffed. "She doesn't look like she belongs there at all." The word stung more than she expected. Anna paused for a moment, then took a deep breath and continued walking. She had never judged people by their appearance, and it saddened her to realize that others did. Meanwhile, the airline staff continued their conversation. "Imagine her sitting next to our VIPs. What a joke," one of them added, laughing. What none of them knew, however, was that the simple woman they had just dismissed was married to the owner of the very airline they worked for. And this oversight was about to cost them dearly. As Anna settled into her economy seat, she couldn't shake off the sting of humiliation. She wasn't one to demand special treatment, but the way the staff had mocked her felt deeply unfair. Unbeknownst to her, another passenger had witnessed everything. The dismissive looks, the snide remarks, the outright rejection. An older woman sitting nearby leaned in and whispered, "That wasn't right. You deserved better." Anna simply smiled. "It's okay. Some people judge by appearances." But the injustice didn't go unnoticed for long. One of the flight attendants, who had been watching the whole scene unfold, recognized Anna's name from the passenger list. A sense of dread crept over her. "Wait a second," she muttered under her breath, pulling out her phone and discreetly searching for Anna's full name. And that's when her heart nearly stopped. Anna wasn't just any passenger. She was Anna Reynolds, the wife of Daniel Reynolds, billionaire and owner of the entire airline. Panic set in. The staff had just insulted and humiliated the wife of their ultimate boss. And what was worse, Daniel Reynolds himself was on his way to the airport at that very moment. The flight attendants exchanged panicked glances. Whispers spread among them like wildfire. One of them, Lisa, hurried to the chief steward, her voice trembling. We just denied a first-class seat to Anna Reynolds, the wife of Daniel Reynolds. The chief steward's face turned pale. You're joking. Lisa shook her head. Look it up yourself. A quick search confirmed the unthinkable. They hadn't just been rude to a random passenger. They had insulted the wife of the man who signed their paychecks. Meanwhile, Anna sat quietly in her economy seat, unaware of the chaos unfolding among the staff. The older woman beside her, still upset over the incident, shook her head. They'll regret treating you like that, she murmured. Anna only smiled. I don't need revenge. People show who they are through their actions. But outside the plane, Daniel Reynolds was already on his way to the airport, and he had just been informed about what happened. His response was simple. Hold that flight. The airline staff knew one thing for sure. This was about to get very, very bad. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the pilot received an urgent message from the airline's headquarters. Delay departure immediately. VIP boarding. Confused, but unwilling to question the order, the pilot relayed the command. The flight attendants, now frantic, whispered among themselves. Lisa rushed toward Anna. Her demeanor completely changed. Mrs. Reynolds, she stammered. There's been a mistake. Please, let us move you to first class. Anna raised an eyebrow. Oh, a mistake? I thought first class was fully booked. Lisa swallowed hard. We can make room. Anna gave a small smile, but didn't move. No, thank you. I'm comfortable here. Before Lisa could plead further, a new voice rang out from the front of the cabin. Anna. All heads turned as Daniel Reynolds stepped onto the plane. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his presence was commanding, exuding quiet power. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder. The airline's billionaire owner was standing in economy class because his wife had been disrespected. Lisa turned white as a sheet. The other flight attendants stood frozen, awaiting the storm. Daniel's eyes locked onto Anna's. He knew his wife well. She wasn't one for revenge, but she also wouldn't tolerate injustice. Without looking at the staff, he spoke calmly. Are you happy sitting here? Anna glanced at Lisa, then back at her husband. Actually, yes. The company here is much better. She gestured to the kind elderly woman beside her, who was now grinning. Daniel smirked. Fair enough. Then his gaze shifted to Lisa. His voice dropped to a dangerously quiet tone. We'll talk after the flight. Lisa's knees nearly buckled. The entire plane held its breath. Lisa's face turned pale, her confident arrogance now replaced with sheer panic. She opened her mouth to say something, an excuse, an apology, anything, but Daniel had already turned his attention back to his wife. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder. Some recognized Daniel Reynolds as the billionaire owner of the airline. Others simply sensed the shift in power. Anna, still seated comfortably in economy class, patted the elderly woman's hand reassuringly. It's just a little turbulence, she joked, making the woman chuckle. Daniel exhaled, his gaze softening as he looked at his wife. If you're happy here, I won't insist, he said. Then, with a smirk, he turned to the flight crew. But I do insist on a little change. Lisa stiffened. Sir, Daniel raised a hand, silencing her. He turned toward the pilot, who had been watching in stunned silence. From now on, let's make sure our staff treats every passenger with the respect they deserve, regardless of their seat. The pilot nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Reynolds. Daniel's next words made Lisa's stomach drop. And make sure this particular flight attendant doesn't represent my airline again. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Lisa's mouth opened in horror, but she found no words. She had spent years climbing the ranks, treating first-class passengers like royalty while looking down on economy flyers. Now, in a mere minute, her career had crumbled. Anna, however, spoke up. Daniel. Her husband looked at her, waiting. Anna sighed, glancing at Lisa. I don't believe in ruining someone's livelihood over a mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance. Lisa's eyes filled with unshed tears. Daniel studied his wife before nodding. Very well. Then, looking at Lisa, he added firmly, You'll be retrained. You will learn what customer service truly means. If you fail again, you won't have another opportunity. Lisa nodded frantically, her arrogance completely gone. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Anna simply smiled and turned back to her book, as if nothing had happened. The plane finally took off, but for many on board, This flight was one they would never forget. As the plane soared through the clouds, Lisa retreated to the flight attendant's station, her mind racing. She had narrowly escaped being fired, but the humiliation still burned. She had spent years perfecting the art of catering to the rich and powerful. How had she miscalculated so badly? Meanwhile, passengers whispered among themselves. Some smiled at Anna with admiration, while others exchanged looks of satisfaction at seeing justice served. Daniel leaned toward his wife. "You always amaze me," he murmured. Anna chuckled, shaking her head. "I just believe in kindness, Daniel. People can change." A few rows away, Lisa overheard this and swallowed hard. Could she really change? Determined to prove she was worthy of her second chance, Lisa straightened her uniform and took a deep breath. Then, with a newfound humility, she walked down the aisle, offering refills and ensuring all passengers were comfortable, regardless of their class. When she reached Anna, she hesitated. "Mrs. Reynolds, may I get you anything?" Anna looked up, sensing the sincerity in her voice. She smiled. "Just some water, please." Lisa nodded quickly and returned with a bottle, placing it gently on the tray table. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this flight would change more than just her career. It might just change her as a person. And for the first time in years, Lisa wanted that change. As the hours passed and the plane continued its steady course, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she moved past the first-class cabins, she found Anna's eyes on her. It wasn't the look of disdain she had been used to. It was a look of understanding, almost like Anna was waiting for her to prove herself. Lisa moved back and forth, trying to push the thoughts of the confrontation out of her mind. She did her best to cater to the passengers, offering them drinks and snacks with a level of professionalism she hadn't shown before. But it wasn't until her last round through the cabin that the truth hit her. She wasn't just doing this for her job anymore. She was doing this because, in a strange way, she owed it to herself. As she passed the first-class section again, Anna caught her eye, her gaze lingering just a bit longer. It wasn't judgment, nor was it pity. It was encouragement. A small knot formed in Lisa's stomach, and suddenly, the weight of everything she had ignored for so long seemed to come crashing down on her. She realized that, in her blind pursuit of status and power, she had lost sight of what truly mattered: respect, humility, kindness. "Hey, you okay?" One of the other flight attendants, Sarah, asked as she passed by. Lisa blinked, shaking her head. "I don't know. I think I need to change some things." Sarah raised an eyebrow, but didn't push it further, allowing Lisa the space she needed. As the flight neared its destination, Lisa stood by the galley, staring out the small window at the sprawling city below. She couldn't help but think about Anna and how her quiet strength had challenged everything Lisa thought she knew about class and respect. Anna hadn't had to do anything other than be herself. She hadn't even raised her voice. And yet, she had made all the difference. Lisa made a silent vow. She would never forget this moment. She was going to do better, not just for her career, but for herself. She was going to prove that, even if you start from the bottom, you could still rise with integrity. The plane began its descent, and Lisa took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. As the plane touched down and the flight began its final descent, Lisa's thoughts were still swirling. She felt a strange mix of guilt and excitement, the kind of unease you experience after realizing you've been looking at the world all wrong. The passengers slowly gathered their things, and Lisa found herself standing near the front of the cabin, her heart racing. Just as she finished securing the last overhead bin, the plane's engines finally sputtered to a gentle stop. The announcement was made that passengers could begin to disembark, and Lisa turned to face the first-class section one final time. That's when she saw him. A tall man, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, exited from the first-class cabin. His broad shoulders and confident stride immediately caught Lisa's attention. He moved with a purpose, and as he stepped into the aisle, their eyes met. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just his presence, it was his unmistakable familiarity. She had seen him before, but where? The man gave her a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Lisa stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. He was walking toward her now, with the same quiet authority that Anna had shown earlier. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth, warm, but firm. "Could I speak to you for a moment?" Lisa blinked, still reeling from her earlier realization. Of course, sir. How can I help you?" She was trained to remain professional, but she couldn't help the confusion and curiosity that bubbled within her. "I've been watching you this whole flight," the man continued, his gaze softening. "You've been taking your job very seriously." "I respect that." Lisa's heart pounded. "Thank you, sir. I always try to give my best." He paused for a moment, scanning her face as if weighing his next words. "You've been working hard. More than most people here." Lisa frowned. Was this a compliment? Or was he just being polite? "I have to be honest," he said, suddenly softer, almost hesitant. "I don't know if you know this, but I'm the owner of this airline." Lisa's jaw dropped, professional mask slipping for just a second. "Wait, what? You?" She trailed off, realizing too late that her surprise was obvious. The man smiled warmly. "Yes, I'm Vincent Hawke, the man who owns this airline." He extended a hand toward her, his grip firm yet welcoming. Lisa was momentarily speechless. She had never imagined, in all her years of working in customer service, that she'd find herself standing in front of the owner of the very airline she worked for. The thought of the man who had been casually sipping his drink in first class now standing before her made the entire situation seem surreal. "I wasn't sure you knew," Vincent continued, still holding her hand, "but I've seen how you've handled yourself. I admire your dedication. It's rare, even in my own company. Not many people have that kind of integrity." Lisa felt her cheeks flush. She didn't know what to say. She was overwhelmed. "Listen," Vincent said, his expression suddenly more serious. "I have a policy at my company that I take very seriously. Treat everyone with respect, no matter their position. I couldn't help but notice how you handled the situation earlier with a first-class passenger. I'm impressed." Lisa didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much of her life being dismissed and overlooked, both by passengers and colleagues, that the words felt foreign to her. Vincent smiled again, sensing her discomfort. "I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, Lisa. I just wanted to say that your work doesn't go unnoticed. You have a future here if you want it." He paused, letting that sink in. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. The owner of the airline was actually speaking to her, praising her efforts. She suddenly realized that she wasn't just talking to anyone. She was talking to the person whose world she had been unaware of. "Thank you," she finally managed to say, her voice a little shaky but sincere. "That means more than you know." Vincent gave her a nod. "You've earned it." As he turned to leave, Lisa watched him walk down the aisle and out the door of the plane, disappearing into the terminal. She stood there for a moment, her thoughts racing. A quiet shift had happened within her. She had no idea why Vincent had noticed her, but one thing was certain: this was just the beginning. Lisa made her way through the terminal, still feeling the weight of her conversation with Vincent Hawke. The words he had spoken echoed in her mind, his praise lingering like a rare gift. She wasn't sure what to make of it all yet. After all, she had worked in customer service long enough to know that people with power often came and went, leaving little impact on the lives of those they passed by. But Vincent Hawke felt different. She shook her head, trying to push away the thought. No need to get carried away. After all, it was just a few kind words. Nothing more. As she walked toward the exit to meet her fellow employees, something unusual happened. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text notification flashing on the screen. She glanced down and froze. It was from an unknown number. "Meet me at the lounge in 30 minutes. I have something important to discuss with you." Vincent Hawke. Lisa's pulse quickened. She couldn't believe what she was reading. The owner of the airline wanted to meet with her again? She hesitated, glancing around the terminal. Was this some kind of joke? Or worse, a mistake? But there was no mistaking the familiar name at the end of the message. It was clear. Vincent had written it himself. Panic rose within her as she considered what to do next. She had no idea why he would want to meet again. Was he testing her? Giving her another chance to prove herself? Or was there something more? Despite the fear churning in her stomach, she found herself walking toward the lounge, her steps quick and purposeful. She couldn't ignore this. Not after everything that had happened on the flight. The strange encounter, the praise, something was happening, and it felt bigger than she could understand. When she arrived, the lounge was quieter than usual, with only a few scattered passengers seated and sipping coffee. She spotted Vincent immediately, seated at a corner table, his eyes scanning a tablet in front of him. The moment she approached, he looked up, his expression calm, almost amused. "You came," he said simply, his voice warm yet commanding. "Ah, I didn't know what to expect," Lisa replied, taking a seat opposite him. "Is everything okay? I didn't expect to hear from you again." Vincent smiled slightly, putting his tablet down. "I know this may feel a little unusual, but I wanted to talk to you, Lisa. Really talk." Her heart raced as she leaned forward slightly. "About what?" He sighed, his tone turning a bit more serious. "I've been following your work for a while. Not just today, but for a few months now. You stand out, and I don't say that lightly. I've seen how you handle tough situations. Your professionalism, even when others don't appreciate it. And that's why I wanted to offer you something." Lisa blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm just a flight attendant." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "That's exactly why I'm here. You may think you're just a flight attendant, but that's not the point. You have the drive, the focus, and the character that I need. And that's why I want to offer you a job with the company. Not as a flight attendant, but something much bigger." Lisa's mouth went dry. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "A job? In what capacity?" Vincent leaned forward, his voice steady and direct. "I'm offering you an executive position in the company. You'd work closely with me and my team. You'd help shape the future of the airline. No more serving drinks. No more cleaning up after passengers. I want someone who understands what it takes to make this company run smoothly on the ground and in the air. And I believe you're that person." Lisa sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This wasn't just an offer for a promotion or a simple upgrade. This was something entirely different. She wasn't sure whether to feel overwhelmed or exhilarated. "Ah, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "This seems like a huge step." Vincent nodded, his expression understanding. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I want you to think about it. The opportunity is here, if you're willing to take it. You've proven yourself. Now it's time for you to prove to yourself just how far you can go." Lisa's heart was pounding in her chest. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. To go from being overlooked and dismissed by so many people in her life to having the owner of a multi-billion-dollar airline offer her a chance to be part of something bigger. She couldn't fathom it. Vincent stood up slowly, his tone softening. "Take your time. Think it over. But just know this, if you decide to join me, this is a world you've only glimpsed. And I believe you can do great things." As he walked away, Lisa sat in the lounge, feeling the weight of the offer sink in. For the first time in her life, she realized that she was standing at the edge of something extraordinary. And now the real question was, could she take the leap? Lisa spent the next several days in a haze of uncertainty. The offer from Vincent Hawke had shaken her in ways she couldn't describe. She went through the motions of her daily routine, serving drinks, assisting passengers, and walking through the terminal with the same autopilot precision she always had. But her mind was elsewhere, constantly looping back to Vincent's words. Each time she walked into the crew room or saw a first-class passenger being pampered, she felt the sting of her current reality. She was good at her job, better than most, she believed, but there was a ceiling she had long since hit. The thought of what Vincent had offered felt both exhilarating and terrifying at once. She found herself reaching out to her closest friends for advice, but no one seemed to fully understand the gravity of the decision she was facing. "I mean, you're saying you'll leave being a flight attendant and go work with the owner of the airline?" her best friend Sarah asked over the phone. "That's huge, Lisa. Are you sure it's not some kind of test or a joke?" Lisa sighed, pacing around her apartment. "It doesn't feel like a joke, Sarah. He was serious. And I'm not sure I'm ready. What if I fail? What if I can't keep up with it all? I've never done anything like this. Lisa, you've been working with customers your whole life. You've seen it all. I think you can handle it." Her words of encouragement felt comforting, but the reality of it all still weighed heavily on Lisa's mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change in her life, and she wasn't sure if she was prepared for it. Later that evening, she sat in her small, quiet apartment, staring out the window at the city lights twinkling below. Her phone buzzed on the table in front of her. It was another message from Vincent. "I'm still waiting for your answer, Lisa. Take your time, but I believe in you." Those words seemed to echo louder than any others. The belief he had in her. It was almost like a spark of light in the darkness. She had spent so much of her life doubting herself, never really feeling like she belonged in the upper echelons of society or business. Yet here was this billionaire, the very man who owned the airline, telling her that he believed she could do it. Lisa closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She could feel her pulse quicken, the weight of the moment almost suffocating. The opportunity was real, and it was hers, if she was brave enough to take it. The next morning, she decided. She had already spent enough time wondering if she could do it. Now it was time to find out. She picked up her phone and dialed the number Vincent had given her. "Mr. Hawk?" she asked when he picked up. "This is Lisa. I've thought about it, and I'm ready. I want to take the job." There was a pause on the other end before she heard him respond, his voice laced with quiet excitement. "You're making the right choice, Lisa. I knew you would. Welcome aboard." Lisa could hardly believe what she was hearing. The words felt surreal, like they didn't quite belong in her life. But they did. She had made the decision, and now there was no turning back. As she hung up the phone, a rush of emotions overwhelmed her. There was fear, yes, she couldn't deny that. But beneath it all, there was something deeper, excitement, anticipation, and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The world was opening up before her, and for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt like she was ready to embrace it. Over the next few weeks, Lisa went through a whirlwind of preparations. She was introduced to the high-powered world of corporate meetings, international business deals, and a level of luxury she had never imagined. She learned about the airline's future plans, the challenges they faced in an ever-changing market, and how every decision, from flight routes to customer experience, could make or break the company. Vincent was there every step of the way, guiding her, offering advice, and pushing her to be the best version of herself. And though the work was demanding, Lisa thrived. She found herself contributing ideas in meetings, earning respect from her colleagues, and gradually proving that she belonged in this new world. But even with all the new responsibilities, there were moments when she missed the simplicity of her old life, those early morning shifts serving coffee to passengers, the hum of the plane's engines as it took off, the quiet conversations with other flight attendants. One day, after a particularly intense meeting, Vincent caught her in the hallway, his expression curious. "You're quiet today," he remarked. "Everything okay?" Lisa smiled softly, trying to hide the bit of homesickness that had crept in. "I'm just adjusting, I think. It's a lot to take in,